Ralph Pagan, Donnie Elbert, Johnny Andrew and the Enjoyments, Al Green, Brenton Wood, War, Barbara Mason, Little Anthony's, and the Imperials, I'll let you come to a conclusion of what all these artists have in common. Post-World War II, the American manufacturers saw a huge surge in automobile purchases and production as a result of the rationing era coming to an end in 1946. The used car market was flooded with inexpensive vehicles made available to working-class people of color. Specifically, we see in Southern California the opportunity to use the surplus of airplane hydraulic systems in these cars' suspensions. This would make a whole community of people that stood by not only a love for the vehicle and the customization of it, but also the symbol of its resistance that carried with the car. Years later, in the 70s and 80s, this self-identified group would always assume its own style and influence that is spread to other parts of the world. But I always noticed something about the music played in these cars. They were all black jazz, blues, and R&B artists who were blasting at the Lowrider oldies festivals. The Depression was long over. The rationing era came to an end, and the men who came back from World War II, who could sustain a mental health healthy enough to land a mortgage and a job, were using their mechanic skills plus money to fund their car customization hobbies. For the white folks who were already customizing their hot rods prior to the war, they resumed the same path of building things like the Pumpkin Seed Streamline, designed by Bill Burke.
And where did they come from? Where did all these Model Ts come from?
They picked them up out of the streets and whatnot. People then, those days when anything went wrong, instead of paying money to have it repaired, or they'd crash a car, they'd give it away. The wrecking yards would give them a few dollars for it, and those pieces were laying around then. You'd have
Wally Parks, founder of the NHRA and the first editor of the Hot Rod magazine, helped publish the magazine's first edition in the month of January in 1948. As a result of his work, we see drag racing become accepted in the world of motorsports, transforming the media's understanding of this brewing hobby. So as the media would consume these images through sources mentioned, a group of people started to do their own customization work on vehicles accessible to them. The Mercury 8 edition, specifically years 1949 to 51, were a common lowrider conversion due to the lead sled body shape, understood by me by how the shell or the body sat on the chopped roof, which indicates a suspension drop. George Barris and Sam Barris were famously known around the Los Angeles area for customizing builds like the Mercury, but in the Bay Area, George Bailon was making his name popular with his car titled Miss Elegance. This car was famously known to win awards with just its gray primer, and eventually held winning titles at the Oakland Roadster Show. At this point, Barris and Joe had their own rivalry, with Barris brothers, who had worked on over 1,000 custom builds, now started to build a client list of celebrities, including people like Lionel Hampton. A quote as following says, "Miss Elegance, Joe Bailon quickly became recognized as one of the Northern California's leading customizers. His talent and growing reputation set the stage for one of the most exciting rivalries in custom car history. Joe Bailon versus George Barris, the 1952 National Roadster Show, marked a defining moment in this rivalry. As the most prestigious custom car show in the United States at the time, the stakes were high, and anticipation was even higher. According to the show's manager, Mary L. Sloanaker, the fierce competition that year was expected to come from the custom build entries submitted by two of the most respected names in the field, George Barris of Los Angeles and his name's Joseph Bailon of San Leandro. Now, with the growing black and brown middle class being created, the use of the vehicle and the purchase of one was a nod to the American status that the car held. But in the 1960s, we see less of the classic American Ford style being replaced with the new muscle car models. In 1958, we will see California create its first initiative to rid the roads of these kind of vehicles, as a section was added to the California Vehicle Code, quote, It is unlawful to operate any passenger vehicle or commercial vehicle under 6,000 pounds, which has been modified from the original design so that any portion of the level of the vehicle, other than the wheels, has less clearance from the surface of a level roadway than the clearance between the roadway and the lowermost portion of any rim of any wheel in contact with the roadway, which would later be amended by the amendment in 1984. Chapter 462, Section 3. Now, when it came to drag races and the hot rod scene, we will see minimal black and brown drivers behind the wheels of the fast models. But in the mid-early 1950s, we can see people like Ron Hines purchase his first car, a Mercury 1949 edition with a chopped roof. His father would declare he would be too young to drive in his state, which was New York. In grade school and college, his love for cars grew and especially solidified when he met Ennis Dawson in 1963, a friend who would bring Hines to a local drag race in Philadelphia. He would be inspired by these races to create a car of his own to bring to the track, a 1953 Studebaker coupe, and installed a 364 cubic inch motor, Buick motor, and a 4-speed transmission. This car would later be submitted by the NHRA Strad Rod Dragway competition. Ron Hines, around the same time, met Leonard Miller, who, fun fact, ordered his parts from George Barris to be shipped to Pennsylvania. Leonard Miller would create the BAR, which was Black American Racers Association, while Hines would also become acquainted with Benny Scott, which is interesting because Benny Scott's dad would be known to do midget racing back in the 1930s, which is a racing hobby that ended in the 1950s and was brought back for demonstration purposes, but never was made safe enough to be made a solidified aspect of racing sports. Nonetheless, Bill the Bullet would father one of the first men to join the first black racing teams to be in NASCAR. Now, these men's careers would span over a 30-year period, starting from the Dixie circuits to local races in their town, earning fan bases enough for them to create a rippling effect of influence within the car community, which, fun fact, the only black woman to hold a NASCAR driving license, father also drove in NASCAR in the 2000s, but was born in 1958, the same year these men would be in the start of their career, and the same year the customization of the car in California became a reflection of the state opportunity to discriminate against black and brown people. But these sports aren't readily available to someone who doesn't have the funding, access to network, and overall time to compete. What, in my opinion, was already breeding on the street was a car scene that provided people to treat their car as a moving art piece that represented their individual identity. In different states, this was presented differently on each car, and the candy paint style that came out of Joe Bailon's workshop could only be replicated from those who bought this specific kit or Joe himself. Simultaneously, Barris had a car club that sold their parts to subscribed individuals. This is a small world with an inspired audience. Bill Hines and George Barris are a great example of men who see the color of money and not the person, as we see many black lowrider owners coming from their shops and buying parts from them to customize the vehicles. A great example of a lowrider with a hydraulic installed was John Derrick's 1958 Chevy with a candy paint tangerine and a Buick grill. This would be featured in a car show in 1967. A great source for me in this essay was 46 to 64. The candy paint would be a result of Joe Bailon's expression and inspiration of the San Francisco sunset. Hydraulics installed from Ron Aguirre or Bill Hines. Interior done by Eddie Martinez. The police hating due to the implications that you might feel good as a black or brown person for owning a nice item. For many who purchased a hoopty and brought it back with a combination of life-changing customizations and made it a part of their weekend routine. Being a lowrider, listening to music that always felt like Sunday was now a cemented identity. In 1965, the Watts riot broke out as a result of the police brutality against Marquette Fry. The term first coined by the police after the 1965 Watts riot, and Jack Kennedy relates following in the book Lowrider, History, Pride, and Culture. They, the police, were using the term lowrider as a derogatory term for the young black kids that they were causing all the trouble. They said that they were kids who drove cars with no springs and no seats so they could ride low. August 16th, 1965, Eldridge Cleaver penned an essay while he was imprisoned in Folsom Prison. In the essay, he mentioned black inmates discussing the Watts riots as lowriders. As we left the mess hall Sunday morning, a mill around in the prison yard, after 4 days of the abortive uprising in Watts, a group of lowriders from the Watts Assembly on the basketball court, they were wearing jubilant, triumphant smiles and animated by a curious spirit by which they too were in the thick of uprising takes place hundreds of miles away in the south in the Watts ghetto. Baby, he said, they walking in fours, kicking in doors, dropping reds and busting heads, drinking wines and committing crimes, shooting and looting, sliding and lowriding, setting fires and slashing tires. It is not known whether the term was coined by Watts youth or the police, but it was associated with Watts black youth and their cars in 1965, and there was even black lowrider prison gangs and car clubs that operated between 1965 to 1967, according to Kustomrama.com. It's interesting because you know that another popular lowrider, the Buick in 1955, was the car that Marquis Fry was driving the day that he was assaulted by the police. But it's hard for me to believe that they weren't being discriminatory. It's clear either way that the quote, term lowrider was coming into rotation to describe the POC youth. In 1977, the first edition of Lowriding magazine was released, and the company would see success after many years of trial and error. To be featured was an acknowledgement for the work put into the ride. Honestly, I could go more into the work done on these vehicles or how every model held its own space and era. Whether it's 10 years old for the time or 20, these vehicles had a classic body make that we don't see in our modern builds. I wish some Chicanos saw how influential black culture is to an identity within the lowrider community, as if black folks also cannot be Chicano. But I just wish I saw that more reflected in the people that were in front of the rides. Long story short, happy birthday to my brother, and I hope this essay taught you something. I learned a lot during this essay about cars, about political trends in the economy. I'm sorry, y'all, I'm tired. I learned a lot about cars, trends in the economy, trends based off war, and yeah, I'm excited to talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.